9 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. It's our Ed and Jack Belcher along with you here on the game as we navigate through this week. Another just cold, bitter, awful day outside out here in Columbia. 33 degrees when I last checked the weather a few minutes ago. You got your toboggan on today, and for somebody that's from New York, if you're cold, that means it's really cold outside.
Yeah, it's freezing, and I catch grief all the time from people at baseball games for wearing the winter hat last weekend when it's like in the 50s outside. And yeah, this weather justifies wearing the beanie for sure.
I got a haircut the other day, and I'm in the phase where the first couple days after haircut, I won't wear a hat. Because I'm like, well, I got to get my money's worth out of this thing. But after about a week, I'm like, yeah, I'll go back to wearing hats again. So no toboggan for me today. But if I had not got my hair cut, I definitely would have worn one.
Yeah, it's so cold out. And then you see next week, it's going to be like 69 degrees is the high and stuff. And it's just like, man, like, why can't we have that all the time?
Yeah.
What did we do to deserve this cold weather?
Well, next week sounds pretty nice. We just got to go through this week, unfortunately, to get there. And, you know, it's the false spring that we all deal with where, again, oh God, 2 weeks ago, I was wearing shorts and a T-shirt outside and, you know, getting somewhat of a tan, right? And now we're bundled back up and dealing with late February. But that's winter / early spring in the South, I guess.
Yep, and as a result, you know, a sport like baseball has to deal with I can't even imagine. I was not there last night, but I cannot imagine. I texted one of my buddies who was covering the game, and he was telling me just how freezing it was and stuff, and I'm like, I'm so glad I was not there.
We'll get into what happened last night over at Founders Park in just a second with Gamecock baseball improving to 5-0 on the season, but it is 9 a.m. And by the way, we met one of our listeners yesterday out at Firehouse Subs in Irmo, our guy Randy, who listens pretty much all day long and enjoys all of our shows. He said he loved the Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Yes.
So, Randy, today's Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up is especially for you.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. All right, so plenty of sandstorm was bumping last night over at Founders Park. Unfortunately, Jack, I don't think there were a lot of people in attendance to listen to it and get any wet towels waving because the conditions were pretty brutal. It was about 35-ish degrees at first pitch. For one, I didn't think this game was going to be played. Quite honestly, like watching the weather through the afternoon, we talked about it yesterday, but before we let you go when we were over there at Firehouse, like, I didn't think it was going to get played. I took a nap yesterday afternoon because I've been doing mornings with Bill with Preston this week, and I woke up at like 3:55 in the afternoon, checked the weather, saw it was raining and nasty. I'm like, oh, this game's not going to get played. Turn on the TV. Well, guess what? They played all 9 innings, and credit to them because I wouldn't have wanted to be out there in that.
No, I mean, it looked brutal. I mean, you see the temperature, all the beat writers there complaining about how cold it is and stuff, and I'm just like, man, like, I am so glad I ended up staying back. And even then, man, it was snowing yesterday in Fort Mill, which is
I saw that.
Which is the craziest thing. It was snowing hard for a bit there too. But yeah, man, it looked freezing last night. And look, here's a good point that Paul Maneri brought up. I'm not sure if we're gonna play the clip or not, but it's like this is supposed to get them ready for, like, if any of these guys want to go play pro ball, you know, MLB season starts in about a little over a month, and teams like the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies, basically any team that plays up north will have to play in these elements to begin their season for probably the first month of the year. So it's a reality they have to face. It's not going to always be like this all the time in South Carolina with the weather. It just so happened on this day it was absolutely freezing.
Yeah, if you're above the Mason-Dixon line, you're going to deal with some nasty weather for the first roughly month of the game of the baseball season. Like the Rockies get snowed out a couple times a year. Like those kind of things are what you have to deal with. And yeah, we tend to play baseball in more temperate climates in college at the early part of the season, but you don't have that option in the major leagues and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, kind of getting those guys ready. In fact, here is what Coach Mary did have to say, after last night's game when it came to playing and winning in those elements, how that sets these guys up for potential future success.
But, that's the thing is from day one, we preach to the players. I don't even let them talk about the weather, and I test them every so often. And when I say something about the weather, they all scream back at me. Nobody's allowed to talk about the weather. A beautiful day is when you're able to play. If you get out on the field, it's a good day. Whether it's cold, hot, windy, wet, dry, it doesn't matter. And so you prepare them for days like this. But today was a test. I mean, I don't care how much you put it out of your mind. It was cold. It was wet. It was windy. Yeah, those were as difficult a conditions as you can play. But I also told them that, look, you someday want to play professional baseball. They start the season April 1st in northern cities. And in the minor leagues, it's going to be cold. Much less in the big leagues. I mean, if you're playing in Wrigley Field or Fenway Park or Milwaukee or wherever, you're going to play in some cold conditions, and they don't put an asterisk next to the statistics or the wins and losses where the games are played in less than ideal conditions. So you have to handle it all. And I told him after the game, I'm certainly convinced that no matter what is thrown our way this year with regard to conditions, we'll be ready to handle it. Because and I thought they handled it tremendously tonight. I really think we played a solid game, hit the ball hard, and really played a good game all around.
And when you hear him say that, this is very much a strategic play on Maneri's part. Because here's the thing. They could have canceled this game if they really wanted to. They could have, and we've seen this happen a million times in baseball. The field's already wet from raining all day. It's nasty conditions. They could say, you know what, let's just cancel this. It's a midweek game against Queens. Doesn't really hold much of a bearing on anything else that's going to happen over the rest of the season. Let's just scrap this thing, and you're probably not even trying to make this up at any point later on down the road. But I think it's getting these guys in a mentality of playing through anything, playing in any kind of element, any kind of condition. God bless Ethan Petrie. The guy's from Florida. He probably doesn't like anything below 65 degrees. He was struggling out there. He had the windsock on, the gator, whatever you want to call it. He was not enjoying the cold by any means. But going through a game like that and finding a way to win in the way that they did, and we'll get into the specifics of the game in just a moment, you build off that. And that's something you can always use as a reference point later on in the season. Again, you're playing LSU, and you're in a tight game at the very end, and down a run or two, and trying to overcome the adversity of that situation. Like, hey, we survived playing in the 30-degree raining weather in a midweek game that we probably weren't all that juiced for. We can do anything at that point. Like it's a teaching lesson that Maneri, being an old school guy, I'm not surprised he used yesterday's game as an example of that.
And they're also going to go through these situations later in the season where not even just the weather. The weather it'll warm up at some point for South Carolina, and I don't blame them for playing in these conditions because, A, you got to get these games in the best you can. And, I mean, look, you need these midweek games just as much as the others. I know there are people out there that, I see it all the time in my comments and stuff on, whenever I'm live tweeting about these games and stuff. It's, why isn't South Carolina blowing these teams out? Why isn't it 15-0 run rule, et cetera, et cetera? It's not going to always be like that. You're going to have games here where you're going to be tight in at battle, 8th inning, you're up by a run, and you need to come through with some insurance, and that's exactly what you did last night. You came through in some tough situations with the elements, mind you, and found a way to score 4 runs in that 8th inning to pull away to a 7-2 win. Even the night before at Winthrop, you were down 3-2. You needed to climb back in this game, and then you get a clutch hit from Talmadge Lecroy, and you get some really good bullpen outings to seal the deal. That is how SEC play is going to be this season. It is going to be like that almost every single weekend, at least for 1 or 2 games where you have these really close games that you have to have someone come through down the stretch. So for people that don't believe midweek games don't matter, these games count just as much as any other ones. But the fact that South Carolina isn't just blowing the doors off people is not concerning because they're going through and converting in these situations where you need to come through in the clutch.
Well, and a game with the elements being they were last night. Hitting's going to become a little bit more premium. Ball's obviously not going to travel as far. And again, the hitting was kind of stop and start throughout the first, roughly half of the game. But again, you found those runs when you needed to in the 8th inning after giving up a couple runs to Queens earlier on that made it a tight 2-3 game. But you gave yourself the insurance runs that made the top of that 9th inning a lot more comfortable for Roman Kimball to come in and kind of lock things down.
Yeah, and what is it Paul Mainieri usually says, that what you do in the first 6 innings doesn't matter. It's what you do in the 7th, 8th, and 9th that matters most. That was exactly true yesterday. And look, the other thing with these midweek games is you're able to, like you mentioned, Roman Kimball. That's a guy that has not pitched yet this year, but you're able to get him in there for 2/3 of an inning, build his confidence up a little bit, and utilize him. Like, these midweek games are so important for the guys that don't get to pitch on weekends all the time. And you see the success they're having as a bullpen, as a pitching staff. It's going to pay dividends later down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll hear a little bit of what Coach Mainieri had to say about the pitching staff and kind of analyze what happened with this game yesterday and how South Carolina did get to 5-0 on the season so far. They'll be taking on Milwaukee this upcoming weekend for their second series, Friday through Sunday. First pitch on Friday at 4 o'clock. Once again, pregame coverage starting at 3:45 on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach, as well as Diamond Sports remain undefeated. We didn't talk about this yesterday. We got into a little bit at the 11 o'clock hour. Did you see how Gamecock softball won their game the other night against North Carolina with all the walks at the very end to run rule them?
I did hear about that. What was it, like 5 straight walks?
It was like 5-6 walks to, I'm assuming North Carolina just ran out of pitching, because it was a 6-3 game going into the top of the 6th inning, or bottom of the 6th inning.
Yeah.
And of course the run rule is 8 runs after 6 innings, and they just walked them all home.
How can you run out of pitching? It's softball.
I don't know. I didn't think you could as well, or maybe just you couldn't find the zone. I don't know. Maybe the environment
I'm guessing.
so intimidating.
Yeah, but hey, the softball, we don't give them enough praise on here. They are killing it right now.
They're doing great.
Like 11-0 on the year. Team, I know it's non-conference play. SEC play is going to be really tough, but this team is surpassing a lot of expectations and deserves a lot more praise and credit from everyone out there.
Look, they've beaten a couple teams already that were in the postseason a year ago. Like, they're not playing a bunch of slouches. Like, these are quality wins, and in North Carolina is obviously no different than that. And we'll try an effort to get Coach Chastain Woodard back on the Gamecock Central Hour at some point here soon. But I don't even think she could have envisioned this being the start and the crazy the comeback wins. You had the comeback win against Virginia in game number 1. You had that crazy walk off the other night, and then you just had a ton of shutouts in between. Like, I don't think she could have even envisioned how crazy of a start this would be for this program.
No, definitely not. It's been wild so far and definitely fun to watch. It's good to see South Carolina softball and baseball having a good start to their seasons, and hopefully it carries over the rest of the way here.
Absolutely. We'll get back into baseball coming up next. Let's hear more of what Paul Mainieri had to say about that 7-2 victory over Queens last night over at Founders Park. It is the Extra Point. It's our Ed and Jack Beltry along with you on your Thursday on the game.
Reno's a strike-throwing machine. I told you that. I also told you we had good depth in our pitching, and you can see what I'm talking about. There's not that, Paul Skeens type guy, but we got a lot of really competitive pitchers, and I think Terry's done a phenomenal job with all of them. And, Crowther did a really good job until he let the two left-handed hitters get on base there in the 8th inning. Up until then, I thought he did a great job. Obviously, Greeno did phenomenal. I thought Jackson Soucy did a super job starting the game. And it was good to get Roman out there. I thought he threw the ball good. So, yeah, we're pitching the ball great.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack Beltry with you on your Thursday. That's Coach Maneri last night assessing the pitching after another victory 7-2 over Queens to improve this team to 5-0. By the way, do you think Jackson Soucy was laughing at everybody how cold they were, considering that he's from Ontario?
Yeah, I mean, hey, the Canadians tend to get it. Definitely for the most part better than us Americans. Like, imagine the conversation between him and Ethan Petrie, and
oh my God,
just seeing him wear the what is it, the gator, the ski cap,
yeah,
whatever.
He had as much of his body covered as he possibly could.
Like, I honestly, man, I've never seen like a South Carolina player wear that. Like, you'll see, like we talked about before, the players that play up north and stuff, they'll wear those things, but man, yeah, that's how you know it's cold.
Listen, I don't think it gets 30 degrees in Land O'Lakes, Florida very much, so that was probably a foreign thing for him, and I get it. I don't like being cold either, and he had some of the mistakes in the field. He was frustrated by the cold, I'm sure, that maybe led to some of those kind of things. But, yeah, Ethan Petrie did not enjoy the cold yesterday. But going back to what Maneri said, another solid day for the pitching staff. Again, Scooey comes in, pitched a solid 3 innings. Greeno comes in, as we've seen for the second time so far this year, does well. And like you said, Crowther, the only one that really kind of ran into trouble after pitching a solid first inning, comes in there, allows a couple guys on despite having 2 outs. And Marlott has to come in and kind of clean it up. Did allow 2 runs across the plate there, but that was really kind of the only damage done on the base paths by Queens yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, look, what can you say? When you get a pitching outing where you're giving up 2 runs, you're striking out 10, you walk 4, you feel pretty good about the outing. And considering it was pretty much a bullpen game, you're going to run into some trouble every now and then. Like, Ashton Crowther ran into some trouble that second inning of work, with giving up the 2 walks there and that, or the 1 walk there, and that allowed Queens to take a little bit of advantage, which they did off of Marlott. And Marlott's been used so much now. I mean, he pitched back-to-back days this week in the midweek games, and I'm sure he'll be used again plenty in the weekend series here. But he's pitched nearly every game so far for South Carolina, but he's still doing very well so far this season. And then you get Roman Kimball in there at the end. And, again, I think you've used just about every arm on your pitching staff by this point, which is a good sign. You definitely want to get Roman in there because, again, you will need these guys down the stretch because we don't know what's going to happen with Eli Jersenbeck yet, right? Like, you can't necessarily assume he's going to be back anytime soon. You have to have other guys step up. And Ryder Garina, man, I mean, what more can you say about this kid? He has been phenomenal so far this season, and it's not a surprise. Like, if you've watched him in the fall and the preseason, he's been like this the entire time. I mean, Maneri's words are true on that. Like, he's been rock solid for this team, and so is Jackson Soucy. So I'm liking what I'm seeing out of this bullpen, but particularly the new guys that have come in and immediately made a splash.
Yeah, so Garino, through 5 innings, has only given up 1 hit, 1 walk, and struck out 9 guys. And you're seeing a guy that has good potential in long relief. And again, already pitched on the weekend as well. So kind of one of your consistent arms you can go to as kind of that second option after your starter is done on the weekends. And I think it was very important to get, Kimball out there. And again, he's a guy that can do just about anything for you. Obviously was a consistent starter a season ago, being used in this bullpen type of game last night, that it's always good to have him at the ready. Because, again, you never know what can go sideways with an Eskew or a McCoy, and if you need to insert somebody else into the starting lineup for the weekend, he would be a good option for that if it comes to that, or come out of the bullpen as well, which is like what he's obviously doing to start this season as of right now. He's very versatile in that way, which is a good guy to have on staff.
Yeah, and look, you're going to need these guys when you come down to not just the rest of the regular season, but when you get to the SEC tournament and postseason play in the NCAA tournament, you are going to need a lot of pitching because pitching wins titles. So you're going to need these guys to all step up, and it's good to see your bullpen going out there and just shoving consistently. It won't always be like this. You'll run into some trouble every now and then. but to see just how good they're pitching so far on the year, it's very encouraging.
Well, going to the offensive side of things, Nathan Hall once again having another impressive game, 4 for 5 with 1 RBI as he continues his red-hot start transferring over from Clemson. And again, he didn't really get a lot of play when he was at Clemson. Again, a very talented roster, and that's understandable. But, man, he is setting the world on fire right now for South Carolina. He's going to cool off. Nobody hits this hot for a super long extended period of time. But, man, what a way to start for his time here at Carolina.
He's the perfect tone setter for this team. I mean, you want this guy as your leadoff hitter. I mean, this is the ideal leadoff hitter for any college baseball team. The guy just does it all. I mean, he gets the job done more times than not, and he's only struck out once this year. So he's 9 for 18. So that means he's putting the ball in play virtually every time he comes up to bat. And when he does get on base, good things tend to happen. So it sets the tone for the rest of the order because Ethan Petrie, 2 spots behind him, goes 3 for 4 with 2 RBIs. And you have Kennedy Jones in the cleanup going 2 for 4. So the lineup is very good from top to bottom, but it definitely makes a world of difference with how Nathan Hall's hitting.
And he did kind of look like tweak his arm a little bit, sliding into second a little bit later on in yesterday's game. Nothing was said about it in the post game. I'm assuming it's not going to be a problem, but you definitely don't want anything to hurt this hot streak that he's been on to start the year.
Yeah, I think he mentioned it maybe briefly, and I was reading some of the live updates on GamecockCentral.com, and I believe he mentioned it briefly that he's fine and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, look, the last thing you want is anyone to get hurt. Like, it was the same deal with Ethan on Tuesday when he, took the hit by pitch and got that ground ball that hit off of him. Like, you don't want to see him get hurt, and you don't want to see Nathan Hall get hurt. So it's early. These games are freezing cold. I'm sure the Stingers are just feeling a lot worse right now. But I think, with the day off today and then you're back in action this weekend, and hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer, I think these guys will be all right.
What's the coldest weather you've ever played a sport in? What's the nastiest conditions?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I don't think I ever played in snow, but, what's probably underrated? Probably like freezing rain. Like it's like this outside, and then it's just like downpouring rain. Like I probably did in football, honestly, but baseball is normally like they would postpone in this sort of conditions.
Yeah, the conditions like you had yesterday in baseball, that was always the game where you like took one off the end of the bat and you just got the stingers through your hands, or you're playing shorter, playing outfield, and you just catch a line drive that just burns because of how hard it hit your hand and all that kind of stuff. Like, I played plenty of little league and high school games in conditions like this. Not fun. My high school tryouts in 9th grade, it was like this time in February. Actually, no, it'd probably be late January, early February, because we started playing around this time. But we had a field next to a river, so we got all that wind coming off the river, and it was like 30 degrees, raining a little bit, kind of like that freezing rain. Probably the coldest I've ever been in my life, or at least in like the top 3.
Oh, yeah, totally. And I can't imagine what it's like being out there. And just, can we also get back to the fact that, like, how many fans were there at that game yesterday?
I probably count on like one hand. There wasn't a lot.
Like,
which is understandable.
Yeah, not just for the fact that it's 4:00 on a Wednesday and people have work and stuff, but also for the fact of it's really freezing out there, and who would want to be watching baseball in those temperatures? Like, I mean, if I were a fan watching out there, I certainly would just be watching from home, to be honest.
Yeah, if you were out there at Founders Park, credit to you, because
big kudos.
I was enjoying that game from the comfort of my warm apartment, and I didn't want it any other way.
No, I mean that's the best way to watch. Unless it's on ESPN Plus, then I think you might have to go to the ballpark.
We didn't talk about this yesterday. The Winthrop broadcast left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, did it really? I must have missed the hundreds of comments on game threads and stuff about how bad the broadcast was.
And look, that was obviously done locally by the folks up there at Winthrop. And I said this yesterday, somebody that used to do high school basketball by myself with one camera person that would just turn the camera left and right depending on where the ball was. I get it. Those kind of low-end productions or small-scale productions can be a little glitchy. But, yeah, that game the other night was frustrating to watch. And they weren't updating the pitch count either.
Yeah.
So it's like, is it 2-1? Is it 1-2? What's going on here?
It's a mess. But you know what? They only have to go up there once a year, and you get SEC Network Plus.
I was going to say, Dave and Bulk Knight was on the call last night. So you got the good crew last night.
Yeah, and it'll be like that this weekend. So no worries there. ESPN Plus, I think, is the only time you got to deal with this year for that Winthrop game. So we'll see.
And of course, you can always listen to it here on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. Same thing for the series against Milwaukee this weekend. First pitch on Friday at 4 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 3:45 right here on the game. Things are changing or planning to be changed in the world of college football. Seeding could it look different in 2025 for the college football playoff? The powers that be are seriously discussing it, and we'll talk about that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Thursday on the game.
107.5 The Game in Columbia, 100.5 The Game in Florence, and 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach. The Game Network, powered by Integrated Media. The Game TV, sponsored by Shep.
Tyler Head once again for our friends over at Twin Peaks. It's always an exciting time at Twin Peaks, but this week especially is extra exciting. We had National Drink Wine Day the other day. Hopefully you got out and enjoyed that. Coming up at the end of this week on Saturday, you have National Margarita Day, and you can celebrate that at Twin Peaks with refreshing margarita specials where pricing starts at just $5. Sip on the $5 House Margarita, indulge in the $6 Peaks Margarita, enjoy the $12 Spicy Strawberry Margarita, or treat yourself to the $9 Twin Peaks Barrel Select Margarita. All these options and so much more available over at Twin Peaks, but you don't have to go there just for National Margarita Day. You can go there anytime, take in all the great sports action, have amazing food, have amazing beverages, and just have a good time enjoying all the great action over at Twin Peaks right down the street from us here in the Vista. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Ed and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Tonight, Carolina calls 6 o'clock. Coach Paris here on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game at Myrtle Beach. As, they try and find some kind of win in these last couple games, as another frustrating loss the other night to LSU, and what many thought was a winnable game, but nonetheless still sitting without a win in conference play with the end of the season fast approaching. Women's basketball, though, taking on Arkansas tonight at 7 o'clock. Premium coverage starting at 6:30 on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG. You might want to say a prayer for Arkansas. You saw what they did to a okay Florida team last week.
Yeah.
Florida's better than Arkansas. South Carolina's going to be mad. They're going to be fired up, and they're going to take it out on them tonight, I think.
Yeah, I'm expecting a rout tonight. So, yeah, best of luck, Arkansas.
Got to let the frustration out of losing that game to UConn the other day, as I'm sure Don Staley's put the fear of God in them in practice this week, so I expect them to respond appropriately tonight.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what those practices have been like, man. It must be absolutely insane, because Dawn, she's not going to take any more losing.
Well, it's one of those things, and look, we've all played for tough coaches at some point. Well, like, you messed up in the game before or whatever the day before, and you don't sleep well that night knowing that practice is going to be like murder the next day. I imagine Sunday night was not a restful sleep for many of the women's basketball players on Sunday.
No, I wouldn't be able to sleep at all. If I knew like the next day was going to be absolute, hell out there, I'd be like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to sleep. I might just try to oversleep, honestly. So I'm not there.
Getting into the college football discussion now, the commissioners of the SEC and the Big Ten, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, are meeting this week down in New Orleans. There's a meeting with all the other commissioners of the conferences coming up next week to discuss the future of the college football playoff. While 2026 is obviously a hot button issue, they are focusing on some things for 2025, and both Petitti and Greg Sankey are in favor of restructuring the seeding process compared to what we had this past year, where, of course, the top 4 conference champions got buys, regardless of where you were at in the rankings. If you were one of the first 4, you got a bye, which included Arizona State and Boise State, in addition to, of course, Georgia and Oregon at the 1 and 2 spots. And we saw those teams, all of them, actually get beat in the second-round games, despite having the extra rest and having the bye and all that kind of stuff. And it sparked the discussion of, was that the right way to do it? And the 2 most powerful conference commissioners certainly would like to see it restructured this year.
Yep. I mean, look, the SEC and the Big Ten, their voices are going to matter more than any other conference. So if they speak, people are going to listen. And I kind of agree. I think that you see it this year. Like if the conference champions, if in hindsight they were all top 5 teams in the country, like they weren't just reseeded as the top, 4 seeds, just based on the fact alone they won a conference title, I don't think people would be having an issue. But because you have teams like Arizona State, Clemson, ranked in the teens of the college football playoff rankings, that's, I think, where you have an issue. Because it's like they got their way in because they are a conference champion, but they get a bye.
Yeah.
And honestly, maybe the bye doesn't even serve them well, just because you get that extra time off while, a team like, like Penn State or whatever has to play those first round games, Notre Dame, and they win and they have the momentum. They're fired up. Like, think about if Ohio State had the extra time off with a bye, how do you think they would have come out in that first game? What if they didn't have that game against Tennessee to kind of get themselves going and get back on track? Because their last game before that was Michigan, and who knows if it sets up for a national title run. So, there's a lot to discuss on this point, but I will say, again, if the SEC and the Big Ten want to do something, more likely than not, it's probably going to happen.
Well, it's important to remember for this year at least, and this being the final year of the current contract, the ESPN, it is something that has to be agreed upon unanimously. Next year, starting with the 2026 calendar year, the SEC and the Big Ten have most of the control, which is why, and this has been rumored and talked about a lot here recently, is that we're going to expand to likely 14 teams. There's going to be multiple AQs because that's what those 2 conferences want to do, and they're going to allow the other conferences to have a smaller amount of bids into the postseason tournament. But for this year, I think about this from the perspective of the ACC, the Big 12, the Group of Five. Pick whatever conference, Mountain West, because that's what Boise State was coming out of.
Because it's like, you have such little power compared to these other conferences. Like, what you say is like, it's like one of us saying something, in a crowd of important people. Like, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, it's not. And, again, Boise State, by virtue of, the ACC and the Big 12 kind of being, by the ACC not being as strong as we thought it was going to be this year, allowed them to get one of those coveted 4 seeds. Otherwise, that would have gone to a Clemson or whoever ended up winning the ACC there. And yeah, I'm not surrendering that, for one, because there's no guarantee that the Group 5 is going to be included in the new playoff starting in 26.
Yeah.
There's a model out there that says, hey, they'll get one spot, but they don't have to give them that. Because again, the SC and the Big Ten yield all the power. If they don't want to give them that spot, they don't have to. So if I'm them, I'm clutching on to whatever I have right now, white knuckled, and not wanting to give it up, because that's my little bit of an advantage to whatever degree that I still have at this point. That again, I don't think this meeting in Dallas next week to discuss these kind of changes, I don't think is going to pass with the approval that it needs.
No, I just don't know if it's necessarily good for college football with the playoff and stuff to have these, we talk about it all the time, these automatic bids for the SEC and the Big Ten. Like, what if the SEC has a year like the ACC one year, or the Big Ten? What if one of those conferences loses, like your 4th best team loses like 3 games? Do they really deserve to be in? What happened to getting the 12 best teams in there? And of course, it'll be expanded eventually. But what happened to getting the best teams in there and not just giving the 2 power conferences all the bids?
I will say this. Expanding with more AQs does take the committee out of it, which, again, we spent the last month of the season debating, hey, is Indiana better than this team? Is SMU better than this team? And that would at least make it more straightforward, like the NFL, where it's like, okay, if you want to get in, here's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Here's the games you have to win. Here's where you have to be in your conference standings, as opposed to, hey, impress this committee of 13 people because we don't really know what they're going to think about your team.
I agree with that, but also, again, going back to the auto bids and stuff, it can't just be all SEC, all Big Ten. Like, you still got to give these other conferences some spots, right?
Well, I get some, just not as many.
Well, obviously, yeah. But, look, I do think there should be a certain amount of SEC and Big Ten in there every year. But again, you also do want to have the other conferences in there, because some of those schools are definitely very good. Like, look, imagine if Notre Dame didn't get into the playoff because
Notre Dame's.
I know,
they
I know,
have their own provision. Don't worry about that.
Yeah,
they get taken care of.
Yeah, no, they definitely do get taken care of. But yeah, it's an interesting prospect to think about. I'm always down with more college football, but just got to get this figured out here.
The times, they are changing, to quote Bob Dylan, and they're not going to stop changing anytime soon, it does not look like. Speaking of change, Major League Baseball exploring robotic umpiring to a degree. We'll tell you what that is coming up next as we get set for spring training here coming up very, very soon. It is The Extra Point. He is Jack Beltry. I'm Tyler Head, along with you on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's Ed and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Remind you, the new craft beer card is only $59 on 1075thegame.com. Saves you around $300. Just go online to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals to purchase yourself a craft beer card. Jack, where do you stand when it comes to technology in baseball?
Look, it's never a bad thing to adapt is my point of view on it.
Okay.
And it depends on the situation. I like some of it. I like other things that I don't like other things, but the one thing I've always been satisfied with was the replay system, right? It took the MLB absolutely forever to get into doing that. But yes, I understand what you're alluding to here.
So Major League Baseball for spring training is going to be testing out an ABS, automatic ball strike challenge system, at roughly a little over half the games taking place this spring. Each team will be given 2 challenges per game and will retain successful challenges. Only the batter, catcher, or pitcher can initiate a challenge, which must happen immediately after the umpire's call. The player must quickly tap his hat or helmet to indicate the challenge. The results of the challenge will be displayed on the scoreboard and television broadcast to communicate whether or not the call was overturned or not. So essentially, you're up at bat. It's a 3-2 count. Ball gets called a strike that's a little bit too outside. You as the batter tap your helmet and say, hey, I think that was a ball. I want to challenge that. Hopefully very quickly they go to this ABS system that can, again, like when you're watching games on TV, they have a little strike zone there, a little box, and it shows you where the ball is. Something similar to that will tell you where the ball is and essentially either confirm or overturn what the umpire called behind the plate.
I think this
drastically reduced game times, which I'm very much in favor of over these past couple seasons. And my thing here is I don't know if the umpires union is going to stand for this.
No, they're not.
Quite frankly, because again, baseball's always had this human element, and we kind of accept that. Hey, they're not always going to get every single call right, and it gives us somebody to be angry at when they get it wrong against our team and those kind of things. But I think, especially considering the fact that it's going to be put up on the scoreboard, it's going to be shown on the broadcast, this almost kind of like public shaming of the umpire of getting the call wrong. Yeah. And there's going to be a track of, oh, man, this umpire's had 12 things overturned on him in the past, 4 weeks or something along those lines. Like, that's going to garner reputations for these guys of being good or bad. And I don't know if the umpires union's going to be okay with that.
They're not going to be okay with this. And I think if anything, though, this should be, because, again, this isn't going in effect. We don't even know if it will go into effect for sure. If it would.
It's being tested.
Yes, it's being tested now at spring training games. It's going to be, I think I was seeing 60%.
Like 60% between Cactus and Grapefruit League, which, again, this is what they usually do with the rule. They test it out in spring, see how it goes,
and then
the next year would be when it would go into effect.
But if anything, though, this should motivate umpires to get their stuff together and get it right, because it's like, I get it. You miss a call every now and then. It's human. But, man, at some point, you got to be able to accept the fact that times are changing. And if you're not going to make the right calls, if you're not going to be able to see what it is, you're going to have to adapt. You have to. Some guys are going to have a tight strike zone. Some guys are going to have a very wide strike zone that favors the hitters. But, you got to find some consistency here, because a strike down the middle is a strike, and it should not be called a ball.
Yeah. Again, I'm not going one way or the other on this. I'm intrigued to see how it plays out, much like every other rule change in baseball. And it's one of those things that if it goes well, I feel like in time you won't notice that it's there. The first time you're at a game and you see somebody challenge a ball or strike, people are going to lose their minds. But much like the pitch clock, do you even notice it anymore? It's just become part of the game, and obviously it's done its job in speeding the games up. The lack of shifts, you don't even hardly notice that anymore. I feel like you're just casually watching baseball, and I feel like hopefully if this thing goes well, it'll be kind of one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think it's a good thing for baseball. The more change to help the game grow, the better. If players are complaining about it, and rightfully so, honestly, you need to make the changes that best accommodate everyone.
Wait until we get to the bottom of the ninth in Game 7 of the World Series.
Gosh.
Bases loaded, 3-2 count. Ball is called a ball. Suddenly, oh my God, whatever team won the World Series, go back and challenge it. it was actually a strike.
Oh my gosh.
Batter's out.
It's insane. It's insane. And we're gonna get one of those things. It was the same thing with the pitch clock.
Yep.
When the pitch clock was first initiated, there was a spring training game.
It was the Braves and the Red Sox.
Yes, that's
There's
right.
a walk-off pitch clock
that's
violation.
Right. That's right. And the same thing is gonna happen. Like there's spring training games today, Dodgers and Cubs. That'll be the game that happens. Like just wait.
We'll see what happens. But again, change on the horizon in Major League Baseball. That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, it's the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling Heating. Myself and Wes Mitchell on your Thursday here in the game. Tyler Head here for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Don't know if you looked outside so far today, but it is a nasty, wet, and rainy outside here in Columbia. And if you have an open crawl space under your home and you recently experienced a storm, you might actually have some standing water under there. The high humidity and condensation can create all sorts of problems like mold and mildew and invite pests like termites into your home. And it can also compromise the air that you breathe with you and your family, because about half of the air in your home comes from your crawl space. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com. They'll send a pro out to your home to evaluate your crawl space and foundation problems and get them fixed so you and your family can live without worry going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. 10 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in. It's the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. It's Hourhead and West Mitchell along with you. I'm assuming it's still pretty cold out there.
Only if you admit it to yourself.
Yeah. Well, Jack came in with a toboggan on, so if he's wearing
I'm
it,
about
it's
to
pretty
tweet
cold.
a picture of him, actually.
You are?
I saw him, the rare Jack T. Veltri sighting in the wild out there.
Yeah, well, he was having some car troubles recently, so he was out of the office for a few days.
You know, Jack is originally, as you maybe can tell from his accent that still does exist a little bit,
Yeah.
from the Northeast. So,
Well, the day when it snowed, he was in here in shorts,
okay, all right.
which
Maybe he just likes.
which that's a very northern
Do y'all
thing.
call them toboggans or beanies?
I alternate back and forth.
I had somebody tell me once that it was not a toboggan.
Well,
but
like,
I grew up
toboggan's the
calling
thing that you sled on to some people.
I grew up calling it a toboggan.
I did too. Yeah, you can interchange. I don't care either way. It's, whatever floats your boat, whatever makes you happy.
I'm glad to know that you at least acknowledge that
Yes.
that does refer to a head
It does.
covering.
It does.
Too.
Yes, whatever you want to
Okay.
call it, whatever
All
makes you happy, that's fine. Fortunately, tonight, women's basketball taking on Arkansas. Not going to have to be outside for that one. Going to be over at Colonial Life Arena. Nice and warm inside, as we were discussing earlier. I think it's going to be a slaughter. I think that South Carolina is going to take out its frustration from Sunday's loss to Kentucky on Arkansas coming up a little bit later on tonight as they try and kind of right the ship from the frustrating loss, the other day to UConn. As I would imagine, practice this week for Dawn Staley and her team was probably not very fun.
Yeah, and we've seen South Carolina, especially against teams that they can kind of just outmatch after losses, just play very well and just be focused and be locked in. And you would imagine you're going to see that this week too. And, it was interesting when we talked to Chris Wellbaum yesterday, and Welly has covered this team, as long as anyone, and has seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and of course the phenomenal, as we've seen the last 10 years or so. And I think for Welly, he was as surprised as anybody to see what we saw on Sunday. Not that they lost, but that they lost the way they did. And so I'm very curious to see, what Wellbaum's thought was sort of, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but was sort of like, all right, this was so out of character. This was so unforeseen. This was so just off from anything we've seen this year or in any recent years. Can you take anything from it?
Mm-hmm.
And, we've seen Dawn Staley sort of respond to some questions where, somebody said, hey, why don't you do this? And it was something specifically like, kind of getting into the weeds. And she said, look, we're 22-2, I think, at the time, and we're defending national champs. So they're going to be who they are.
Sure.
But do we see any is it the same starting five? Do we see any tweaks to who's playing? Do we see any tweaks that maybe even tiny stuff that we don't even really frankly notice, but just that are changes they make to how they approach the game? I'll be curious. Sometimes when things go incredibly bad, coaches will say, guys, we're going to burn that tape and never watch it again.
Yeah.
Like, let's just forget it. Other times it is it's a wake-up call. It should be a wake-up call regardless in terms of your focus, right?
Sure.
As a team, I mean. But I'm curious, is it a wake-up call in a sense of do they tweak some things, or is it just more about let's be who we are, but we have to be tougher, is something Dawn Staley's talked about. Do we have to be more focused? What is the approach, and can we even tell, frankly, against Arkansas?
And one of the big talking points coming away from Sunday, and we talked about it with Chris yesterday, was this non-basketball issue that Dawn Staley alluded to on why they didn't play their version of South Carolina women's basketball on Sunday. And yesterday, when she was talking to the media previewing this game for Arkansas, she was asked to kind of follow up on that, and the question kind of even took her by surprise of what they were asking exactly. But here's what she said.
I did. I think some things may not be about basketball. Some things are just, will reveal, and I don't know what they are. I don't know what they, what it is. I'm just throwing it out there. The team that took the floor against UConn really wasn't our team. So as a coach, you have a tendency to think, hey, it ain't just about basketball. What is it about? And we had a come to Jesus meeting, if you will. We apologize for our performances and we move on. We're not going to stay stuck in those spaces. I'm not going to look for things. I'm just going to, call it what it is. Players have to step up. Coaches have to step up. And if we want to accomplish the goals that we have out there, it's going to take a collective effort.
So going back to what you said on Sunday that, set off, the alarms for some people like on a basketball issue. What's going on? Is there a locker room problem? Is it this? Is it that? And, Chris, I think maybe kind of talked some people off the ledge yesterday when we were talking to him of like, yeah, I don't think it's as bad or severe as some people might be making it out to be. And again, it seemed like a comment that she didn't really even realize she said the other day when asked about it yesterday. But again, they just didn't show up. They didn't play their best game. And whatever that was, maybe they were too confident coming off the Florida game of, yeah, we got this. And, we'd won the past couple of games against UConn in the past couple of years. So maybe it wasn't seen as big a threat as maybe it should have been. And they just didn't show up the way they needed to. And I don't have any doubts that the version of the team's going to show up tonight and show up in the next couple games should be locked and ready to go.
Yeah, and to go back to the original quote real quick, she said, obviously when you lose like this, there's something else that's going on that isn't just about basketball. So we got to figure that out and get back on it. So, yeah, we all heard that, read that, saw that, and we're like, what's she talking about?
Yeah.
Judging by her very genuine reaction to the question, when she said that, it sounds like it was more of like a thinking out loud type thing.
Sure.
Like, hey, we just got crushed. We don't get crushed. What's going on? As opposed to, I think you have a tendency to hear that and you're thinking, oh, is she referring to maybe something that already existed in her mind as a possible problem?
Sure.
So I think it was only natural for everybody to hear that and kind of perk their ears up like, hey, what's she talking about? I don't know about you, Tyler, but from her reaction yesterday, it kind of sounds like that was not about anything specific at all, and that I think her antenna is up like, hey, I'm gonna be hyper vigilant in terms of looking around and making sure there's nothing going on in the locker room, making sure there's nothing distracting, making sure there's nothing that could be affecting the on-court play that is carrying over from off the court. But I think if you're a Gamecock fan, you can maybe breathe a little bit easier that this wasn't like where she already kind of saw something bubbling up, and this is just the on-court manifestation of it.
And look, Dawn Staley has obviously earned her trust here at South Carolina with all that she's accomplished in her time here so far. And because of that, she was once again named a finalist for the Naismith Coach of the Year award yesterday, which she's already won 4 times, including the last 3 in a row. And a lot of people looked at last season where, of course, you had lost the freshie class from the year before. Nobody was expecting a national championship, much less an undefeated season out of South Carolina with kind of a new cast of characters in a lot of ways, and that's exactly what they did. And again, we all celebrated here in the streets of Columbia after the fact, and it was kind of positioned as, well, what if Dawn Staley's perhaps best coaching jobs ever to be able to take that crew, go undefeated, and win the national championship? When you look at how flawed this team is, and I say flawed in air quotes because, again, they still only have 3 losses and are viewed as a number 1 seed still as of right now, if they ran the table and won the national championship after losing that way to UConn, after losing Texas, losing to UCLA earlier on the season, would this season be kind of seen in the running as maybe one of the better coaching jobs she's ever done?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, here's the thing. If you win a national championship, if you go on a run, you had to have a great coaching season along the way. They right now, like, for you even to be able to use the word flawed just speaks to how good they've been.
Yeah.
This is kind of like, I remember, and I don't know exactly which year this was, but I remember one of those Bama teams in football, and I ventured over to the Alabama message boards, and they were complaining about how terrible their offensive line was. And Alabama at the time was undefeated and in the midst of like the absolute height of the Saban run there. So this is sort of, you're, and I mean this in the most loving way possible, but you're just spoiled at this point as a fan base because of what they've done. And that's what you want. I mean, there were a few, I'm not even going to bring them up on air. There were a few fringe reactions to the game on Sunday that maybe need to result in your sports posting privileges being revoked, I think. But for the most part, you would think and hope that, these fans realize that you've got the best in the game running your program. And that doesn't mean you can't question a particular decision. Why this? Why that? Within a game, no coach is infallible. Like no coach is in a situation where they're perfect, right? But you can rest assured you've got one of, if not the best in the game right now, steering your ship. This is a setback, and frankly, once you get into tournament play, how much of the rest of it even matters? Like ultimately, it's going to be about, can South Carolina find a way to rebound and play in the paint when they face one of the one or two or three teams that are out there that maybe have what would have been the equivalent of Cardoso for South Carolina. And, I think one of the big things about the UConn game that's sort of just a little bit lost in everything else is UConn was making their shots on this day and South Carolina was not.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just off. And I think we also got to remember, as consistent as they have been, 71. I liked how Wellbaum said it. They won 71 of their last 72 home games, which I actually wonder, did they lose the – I guess they would have. What was the record even before that? You could probably expand this thing out because
probably not too many losses before that.
Yeah, so what's their record in their last 100 at home? So I think for Carolina, we got to remember they are still humans. Like, these are not robots. Like, as high of a level as they have performed, they had their worst night in 3 seasons against an opponent. If they'd had that off night against most any other opponent,
sure, maybe
they don't even get exposed. But because UConn came in, and I think one thing that also gets lost in it, Tyler, give all the credit in the world to UConn. Like, man, they came in they were on a mission. They came out, they were aggressive, they hit shots. They had a girl absolutely go off who I think scored 7 points in their next game.
Yep.
In FUD. So, I don't know. I'm with you, though. Moving forward, I think they'll probably, you would think, smash Arkansas.
You would think.
Although, will there be any hangover from the loss? You would certainly think not, but we'll see. But ultimately, this is a program. Everything is built at this point around what you do in postseason play. So if they go on a run and they get back to the Final Four, they win a title, no one's going to think twice about this loss.
No, not at all. It'd just be, hey, wasn't that kind of weird when they lost by 29 points to UConn? Just kind of a bump along the road of what was a successful season. But a lot of basketball to be played between now and then. Again, tonight, Arkansas, 7 o'clock tip over at Colonial Life Arena. Pregame coverage starting at 6:30 on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG. Carolina Calls with Coach Paris going to be here on the game in Columbia, and 100.3 the game in Myrtle Beach at 6 o'clock. Coming up tonight as his crew looks for their first win in conference play, taking on Texas coming up on Saturday. Lots changed in college football. 2026 is a big year, not only for the college football playoff, but potentially for conference championship weekend as well. What could that look like? We'll dive into that coming up next. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating on your Thursday on the game.
107.5 The Game in Columbia, 100.5 The Game in Florence, and 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach. The Game Network. Here's what's on Sponsored by Columbia Craft, Green Street in the Vista. Craft beer famously hopped. Carolina Calls with Lamont Paris and Derek Scott. Thursday at 6 p.m. Dawn Staley and her Gamecocks take on Arkansas. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. pregame, 7 p.m. tip-off on 98.5 OMG. That's what's on tap on the game. Sponsored by Columbia Craft. 107.5 The Game. Broadcasting live from the Herndon Chevy Studios. You can save up to $20,000 on new Silverados. Stop by or shop online today and see how Herndon Chevy makes you smile. Together, let's drive.
All right, guys, as you know by now, our friends at Integrated Media, they're your go-to spot for anything involving your smart home services. Of course, that could be something as simple as hanging a TV for you as well. Maybe you want to go all in on a home theater system, got an extra room that you want to take to the next level, video game room. Typically, TV installations, maybe that's something that you normally would just do yourself, but you want to take to the next level. Hang it on the wall, hide all the cords, maybe go with a sound bar, surround sound, anything like that. The beauty of Integrated Media is there are really no limitations. They'll sit down, they'll talk to you, they'll come up with a comprehensive plan for what your goals are for your media there at your home, and then they'll just go to work. If you want to see what they've done at other homes, integratedmediainc.com, or you can go ahead and call them and set something up. That's 803-948-8327. Again, that's our friends at Integrated Media, integratedmediainc.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyron West along with you here on your Thursday on the game. A lot of big meetings going on across the landscape of college football, including a meeting this week down in New Orleans between Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey, of course, commissioners of the Big Ten and the SEC respectively, on their thoughts on the current structure of the college football playoff and what changes could potentially be made in the future, both this year and in 2026. They'll meet with all conference commissioners coming up next week in Dallas to discuss ideally changes for this year, but also some things on the table about what 2026 could look like as well, where if you've been keeping up with the Ross Dellingers of the world and their reporting, it looks like we are headed for a 14-team automatic qualifiers galore college football playoff with like 4 teams from the SEC, 4 teams from the Big Ten, and so on and so forth. That's going to look a little bit different than what we've gotten used to these past couple of years. And again, it's money, it's TV, it's all those kind of things that factor into this that does seem to be what the ultimate destination is on the horizon.
Deep breath. First of all, Ross Dellinger, the man, if you're not following him, follow him. He has all the SEC scoop, it seems like, first a lot of the time. Has a great sense of everything going on there. Follow him on Twitter, X, all that. But, man, at what point, like, I was all for expansion of the playoff. I really was. And I thought that the biggest issue we had this year, honestly, was the auto buys.
Mm-hmm.
If you take our current system, which we're not even going to get a feel for what this system even is before they're ready to change the thing again. But if you took it and just had some very small tweaks that would result in different seating, I think we have a pretty good mix right now between keeping the regular season what it is while also giving a potentially compelling postseason. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the talk has always been college football has the greatest regular season in sports, according to a lot of people.
Yep.
And the worry was, well, the more teams you add, the worse off you're going to make the regular season. It's not going to have as much impact. It's not going to matter as much. I think we had one of our better regular seasons we've ever had in terms of entertainment value this past season. The idea of adding more teams, though, already. The idea of automatic qualifiers. The idea of going to 9 games within your conference on the SEC side. I mean, I see people talking about, is South Carolina and Clemson in danger as a game if you add another SEC opponent to your schedule? And the way things were done this year, we know that it's much more about wins and losses than it is about your actual strength of schedule and strength of victories. Now, how the automatic qualifiers are locked into this thing maybe helps you a little bit there, but I don't know. I feel like the people who say college football is just becoming more and more NFL light.
Mm-hmm.
You see where their argument is coming from. And last I checked, all the other NFL, the USFL, the UFL, the Arena League, the XFL, I can barely remember their initials because a lot of them don't exist anymore.
So fast, right? Yeah. And all the details of 2026 have not been ironed out yet, but it does seem like we're going that direction with multiple AQs. And one, I guess, positive of it, depending on what side of the fence you're on, is that would take a lot of the committee decisions out of it. We spent the last half of the season talking about, well, is a 1-loss Indiana better than a 3-loss SEC team, and so on and so forth? What does SMU do if they lose to the SEC in the SEC championship game? Where if we went to this AQ format, it'd be more about your regular season standings as opposed to what a committee of 13 people thinks about your conference, your strength of schedule, and all that kind of stuff, like we've been doing for the past couple of years. So be a little bit more straightforward. And that kind of leads into one of the more interesting things about what could be coming with all these changes is rethinking conference championship weekend, where, as we've known it since the mid-90s when they first introduced the SEC championship game, you take the top two teams, or in that case, the winner of the East, winner of the West. They play in Atlanta, or back then in Birmingham, for the conference title. And that obviously has ramifications on who goes and plays for the national championship and all that kind of stuff. But if you're going AQ, where the top four teams are going to get in, well, what's the benefit of having one and two play each other if they're already going to be in anyway? So it seems that a lot of conferences are kind of latching on to the idea of a more play-in style conference championship Saturday, which we'd call it something else at that point in time, where, and I've seen this tossed out in some of Dellinger's pieces, let's say the SEC gets four teams in. So instead of 1 and 2 playing each other, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5 for the right to earn one of those last two spots instead. Again, you may be anti-expansion. That's something exciting, at least, that they're giving you that does have value, as opposed to Texas and Georgia, who we both knew were going to be in regardless, playing each other just for the right to get a bye in the first round.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
And it most certainly does degrade the regular season even more, I think. And now, I thought the writing was a bit on the wall with the conference championships this past season. Like, you could when the SEC championship, which in some way, I mean, it was not on the level of the national championship, but there was a stretch there where the SEC championship, I would argue, was only a couple of notches below the national. Like, if you were the SEC champion, that carried a ton of weight. Like, that was something, even if you didn't win the national title, you're celebrating that.
Yeah.
SEC championship this year with two huge name brands, one of which resides in the same state where the game is played.
Yep.
There were some empty seats. What does that say about where things are going? So is this better? I think the question is this better than just doing away with the championship game altogether? Because ultimately, if you want the regular season to matter, maybe it's just that your regular season is what determines your champion.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of do that in basketball. We have the tournament, obviously, at the end of that, but you do have a quote-unquote regular season champion in basketball, and you get rewarded for that by getting the number one seed in the basketball tournament. But there's one thing that always keeps things from being just done away with in college football, and that's, of course, money, which we'll expand on this a little bit more on the other side of what exactly this means for the future of the championship format and how that could affect conference championship weekend as well. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Wes along with you on your Thursday on the game.
All right, folks, let me tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing, classicroofingsc.com. 803-590-7870 is the phone number. Head on over to that website now. Hit the little button at the top right-hand corner of your screen where it says free estimate. You may be saying, why do I need a free estimate? I don't have any roof issues right now. Well, if you own a home or business, of course, ultimately that roof may give you issues. And if you live there long enough, ultimately you may need a new roof. So what Classic Roofing is going to do for you is the same thing they did for me and my wife. They're going to come out. They're going to take an extensive look at your roof. They're going to climb up there. They're going to get the drone out as well. And they're going to let you know if there are any current problem areas. They're going to let you know if there are any future problem areas potentially. And also they're going to let you know, most importantly, how much life you have left on that roof. So if that sounds like something you need to do, trust our friends at Classic Roofing, 803-590-7870.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Schooling and Heating. Tyron West along with you here on your Thursday on the Game, talking about changes in college football. As we know, change for the college football playoff on the horizon. As a result of that, it seems like conference championship weekend is going to get restructured across the board. And, you kind of brought up a point there at the end of that last segment of like, well, is there any point in doing this anymore if it's not going to serve the same value that it once did? But for as much as college football changes, it's also a sport that is very much stuck in its ways with, hey, we've always had this thing. We got to keep having this thing. You look at the bowl system being included in the playoff that feels kind of clunky when you do it with the 12-team format where you're playing, the Peach Bowl, the Orange Bowl and stuff on the Cotton Bowl in January 9th and 10th. And, we're going to have maybe a Rose Bowl in the middle of January as well if things continue trending in this direction. It just doesn't feel the same as bowls used to feel. But again, they've always existed. You got to incorporate them in some kind of way. They're bigger bowl games than the other ones, so they have to be a part of this format to some degree. And the same thing is going to be said about conference championships. I think the SEC has a contract with Atlanta running through 2031. So let's say in 26 we go to this new version of championship weekend where instead of 1-2 playing each other, it's a play-in round with 2 or 4 teams. Is that going to be Atlanta? Is that going to be in home venues? Like, do you have to continue to satisfy these contracts and where the money's been for so long because that's the way we've always done it? Or can we finally just kind of blow things up and start over again? I would say probably not.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to blow things up. We know that they're going to have, frankly, a death grip on some of those financial aspects, whether you're a bowl game or whether you're, you look at the TV contracts that, I don't know what the SEC championship brings in financially for, I guess, ABC now with CBS for so long. But all those things are, you kind of have to, like the way they were able to overlay the new college football playoff on the existing sort of like BCS games, it worked. It actually worked better than I thought it might when all this first started. But ultimately, I think what is best for college football and what is best for the fans is not always aligned with what is, these bowl games are holding on for dear life.
Sure. Because again, they make a lot of money off this. I can understand why they don't want to give it up.
Yeah, and so I don't know if there was one change that would be fantastic for the college football fan and the game, in my opinion, it would be if these changes and some of this additional expansion would lead to more at least 1 year of data we have in the current structure of college football playoff was that you got home games for teams. Now, I tend to think the fact that you earn a bye, but then you don't earn a home game for your city, for your campus to reward, I think that's not just an on-field thing. You're rewarded that. You are obviously bringing a tremendous amount of revenue to your college town and, in some cases, the neighboring areas, and you're rewarding that fan base by them getting to see a game in your home stadium that has great magnitude. So I think really your hope is that if there is some good that can come from this, it would that be maybe even if you have a bye, that next week of games, you could potentially every team that is seated into a certain level should have an opportunity to host a home playoff game, in my opinion.
And I think we all said this to some degree prior to this format taking place this past year is like, yeah, it's great that you get a bye, but I think what we ended up being Oregon and Georgia and Boise State and Arizona State looked at what these other campuses were getting by the value of having that home game, saying, hey, we'd love to have that again for our own small cities, our own campuses, and the money that brings in and all that kind of stuff, in addition to what it ended up, the fact that you got to play a game that ultimately resulted in all the lower seeds winning when they got to the quarterfinals. Now, again, that's not going to be the case every single year, but in year number 1, it was at least. So, yeah, if we were building this from the ground up, bowls would have nothing to do with this. We wouldn't have bowls any concern at all. Yeah, you have a neutral site championship game more likely than not, but every other round, just like in the NFL, just like every other level of baseball, but level of sport will be taking place on somebody's home site. And by the virtue of being a higher seed, you get home field advantage through the playoffs until you get to that championship game or whatever. And again, as college football continues to change, we still kind of dig our heels in. I'm not saying we specifically, but the sport as a whole digs its heels in and said, well, we got to uphold this tradition. We can't get rid of that because, we make X amount of dollars and we have this television contract. And that's the frustrating thing is kind of trying to make square pegs fit in round holes sometimes, it feels like.
Yeah, and, I think for the college football fan, too, we're already asking them to pay for, indirectly and in some ways almost directly, pay for NIL and revenue share eventually for the players. So think about if you at this point, and especially after this thing expands, let's say you go watch your team in a championship game for the conference. Then you go to the opening round. Then you go to the next round. So if they're all neutral sites at some point, then the amount of money it costs you to follow your team, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't cost a lot of money. Like you're getting a great value from going to see one of these games in person, and it's super fun. But you don't want to price out people. And I think having a home game just makes it a little bit more accessible. If you live nearby, if you're in the state, having that first round at home for the teams that have earned it, or even going on a more typical away game as opposed to going to one of these sort of NFL-y sort of just sterile environment, just different, more corporate venues and playing in these cities. It just costs more for the fan who wants to follow their team into the biggest games. A lot of times, the biggest games these teams will ever play in.
Well, and like you said with the SEC championship game, which again, that place is usually packed to the gills every single year because up until this past year, it held the moniker of, hey, the winner's going to probably go to the playoff. The loser's going to be on the outside looking in because that was usually always the case. And again, two teams that were guaranteed a spot in. There was a lot of empty seats in Mercedes-Benz Stadium for Georgia fans, saving their money to go to New Orleans or maybe save their money for what they thought was going to be the championship game in Atlanta, back in January. And same thing for Texas fans. Like, why go to Atlanta when we can go to one of these other venues or have a game in our backyard like the Cotton Bowl that they did for the semifinal against Ohio State. So you're making people pick and choose, which, again, for what you want these games to be, especially from a television standpoint, you want them packed. You want a ton of screaming, passionate fans that, I think as time goes on, we're going to continue to lose more value with these earlier games if they are continuing to exist, like you said, these neutral, sterile NFL type of environments.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten hold most of the power. I'm curious to see. We don't know yet what the other conferences are going to say. They're going to have their say as well. I'll be curious to see how much pushback there is to some of the things that, again, are not official but are starting to kind of leak out from these meetings and where things go from there. Because you've already seen, if you are the Big 12, if you are the ACC, you've already seen we very quickly went from a Power 5 to a Power 4.
Mm-hmm.
The SEC ain't going away. The Big Ten ain't going away. But if you're the ACC, if you're the Big 12, you've seen, the fact that you exist is not a given.
Sure.
So I'll be very curious to see what the pushback is in terms of, yes, we all want what's best for college football, but if you're representing one of those conferences, you're fighting for what's best for you. You're fighting for your survival as a conference. And so, I don't know. I think there are maybe still some twists and turns in this thing along the way.
It's important to remember for this year, 2025, there is still a unanimous decision that has to be reached for changes to be made, which is why I don't think the seating is going to change for this upcoming 12-team playoff because they have to get all the conferences to agree. But starting next year in 26, that is when the majority of the power is wielded by the SEC and the Big Ten because essentially the other conferences we're afraid of losing them to doing their own thing. So by saying, hey, we'll give you whatever you want, you can have power as long as you stay with us, so we can still make money off this playoff too. They gave them the power, and the Big Ten and the SEC again are going to basically take up half the AQ spots in this new playoff in 2026 because again they have the power to do that now.
Yep. By the way, I did want to mention, since I mentioned the financial aspect of a on-campus playoff game, Big 12 commissioner had a little different, I guess, take on that. If you advance to the quarterfinals, you have an $8 million reward.
You do get rewarded.
So his approach is that, and this was in response to, of course, the auto buys. He said, I do not have the appetite to give up any financial reward that comes with that buy. So I think if you're the Big 12, if you're the ACC, you're going to be holding on to, and I know we're talking about a lot of different things here all intertwined, but the auto buy thing I think is going to be a big point of contention as they try to make changes moving forward. And if you're the Big 12, you're the ACC, you are hanging on to that auto buy for dear life, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree, which is why I don't think anything's going to change in 2025, and we'll see what ends up happening for 2026. Speaking of changes, a lot of conversation around spring games. Has Matt Rule set a ripple effect across college football that's going to count for other spring games just being done away with? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Wes on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Wes along with you on your Thursday here on the game. We're talking about change across college football, discuss the changes on the horizon for the college football playoff, what that means for conference championship weekend. But in the more immediate future, what's changing with spring games? It wasn't all that long ago, a couple weeks back, where Matt Rule in a presser, said that, hey, we feel like teams are tampering and getting too much intel on our guys by watching our spring games. So, we're going to cancel ours, or we're going to restructure what a spring game is. And that created a lot of conversation. We even talked about it here on the shows as well. Well, according to the LA Times, Southern Cal is not planning on having a spring game this year either. They're going to have a fan appreciation event coming up at the Coliseum later on this summer. But it kind of begs the question, has Matt Rule kind of started this ripple effect where all schools are going to kind of reevaluate what a spring game necessarily means to them and if it's worth taking the risk, as he likes to say?
It's a copycat world. Yes. The answer is yes. I'll be curious. What do fans start pushing back on this? What do spring games matter to people? Fans want to see your team play, yep. And you can't go to practices anymore. You can't. There obviously are no preseason games for college football. So, fans care about student athletes, and they care to see them play. I think the spring game, in a world when you have more transfers than ever, more roster churn and roster turnover than ever, spring game is one of the few chances, other than those 11, 12, 13, 14 games, where fans get to actually go see what the team is all about and see who to look forward to seeing play. And I know it's not the most elite level of football, but I do still think they have a place. So this would be yet another. I'd be sad if the rest of college football just said, we're going to adopt that. And I'm kicking myself because Chris and I, be on the lookout for this on Gamecock Central. Chris and I had a sit down with Shane Beamer yesterday and talked about a number of topics. Did not think to ask him, would he ever consider changes or, not having a spring game. But I still think, guys, I think spring games serve a purpose.
And there's a difference between outright getting rid of it and modifying what it is. Look at Ole Miss last year. They took their spring game and kind of turned it into this flag football skills challenge type of thing, and then a dunk contest. They made it fun for fans. But yes, you're not necessarily seeing the football you're going to see in Saturdays in the fall, but you've at least created kind of a fun environment. It does sound like Southern Cal is going to try something along those lines with a fan event coming up in the summer. But in terms of kind of learning your team a little bit more, it does take that aspect away. And like you said, we talk about with transfers and freshmen coming in, and I gave you guys the jersey quiz yesterday. Sometimes you're watching the spring game figuring out who's who. Okay, who's 45, who's 92, like just kind of learning who these guys are and where to look out for them coming up in the fall. And sometimes you can watch a guy in a spring game that, I know it's very vanilla as far as playbooks go, but man, I like what that guy did in the spring game. Can't wait to see him this fall. And sometimes kind of figure things out of guys that are kind of diamonds in the rough there, that if you go away from a traditional football type of game, you don't get that anymore. Is that the end-all be-all of, fan interest in this thing? No, it's not. But it's one of those things that, again, it's been tradition in college football for a long time that's now being challenged, seemingly because one guy said that he thought it was affecting the way his team's roster was.
Yeah, I look at it, Tyler, like you're chipping away at what makes college football. Mm-hmm. And this one little thing, maybe not a big thing in the grand scheme, but if you chip away at something enough, one day you wake up and it looks completely different than what you knew it to be. And so I don't know. I frankly kind of even hate the idea of what coaches are paranoid because they have to be. I fail to see where a spring game, frankly, spring game can provide a lot of fool's gold. How many times have you seen guys in spring games? I mean, we always joke about the spring game All-American or the spring practice All-American. If you're sitting at home and you're a coach and you're evaluating people on a spring game only, that's a great way to get hurt in terms of your evaluation. So, I don't know, man. teams know who your players are,
Right.
with or without a spring game.
Yeah, and that was the argument, the pushback to Rule. It's like, I don't think whatever, and not that I watched Nebraska's spring game last year, but I don't think there was anything dazzling unless you just put out your entire playbook that caused, and there weren't any like super high profile guys that suddenly transferred after the spring game anyway. It's like, wow, that guy did this in the spring game, and so now suddenly all these schools suddenly want him. Again, I think it's just kind of trying to close off as much as you can. Again, you can't go to practices anymore. That's not open to the public. Like, just trying to control as much as you can control. And if a lot of coaches feel like the spring game's something they can, take the axe to create a little bit more of a wall around their program, they're probably going to do it.
Yeah, don't you think there's still some value for your players to actually get out there and play in front of fans and play in the stadium for the first time, so that you're not, for your young guys, you're not playing in Willie B for the first time or playing. Ask about their special current offer, potential 0% APR financing for 60 months on qualifying equipment. Of course, Krantz is there for you for any and all of your HVAC needs. That could be AC, heating, preventative maintenance, ductless AC, indoor air quality. Also, if you own a business, they are there for you for anything there as well. Obviously, hopefully it's cold out. Hopefully you don't need them right now. Go ahead, get that peace of mind with that preventative maintenance and call them today. But if you are having issues with your heating, Krantz and their family-owned business is who you should hit up. 803-672-3224 or KrantzCooling.com. I know.
Welcome back in.
I have not sent in my music picks. Go ahead. Blame me. I know.
It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. I have mine and Chris's music stuff good and ready to go.
I'm saying I'm owning
I
it,
need
Tyler.
Wes's.
You don't have to.
I know.
You don't have to pour on. I just owned it.
I will tell you this. I've been filling in for Bill this week, so I will be done tomorrow at noon. I have a long window in the afternoon where I can get this done, and we can have hopefully new stuff by Monday. If you get me your list at some point today.
If you say something to me during this hour and I just don't respond, no, I'm saying if I just don't respond, I'm over here working on my music selection.
Okay,
by the way,
that's fine.
so why don't we have some people text in some suggestions for us too?
Sure. Intro music, bumpers, whatever you want. It's got to be clean, obviously. But yes, I will take any suggestions, and I will try and.
We're going to revamp it. Tyler's going to revamp it, not
yes.
we. Tyler's going to revamp, but send it in on Firehouse Subs text line. What should our new bumper musics be?
Yes, Chris, I was impressed by your list. Some good songs in there that hopefully we can get in there and start hearing on these rejoiners.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. It's time for a refresh and an update. So we'll get on it.
And a intro or rejoining song, much like a walk up song in baseball, it really kind of sets the tone for the at bat or the upcoming segment. Which we have a ton of good walk up songs for Gamecock baseball, and heard quite a few of those yesterday as the baseball team starts off the season 5-0.
Wow,
I know, masterful, right? 7-2 win over Queens yesterday, and less than ideal conditions. I enjoyed watching that game from the comfort of my warm home and not being out there in 30 degrees and raining, but credit to them going out there, getting it done, and probably freezing their butts off in the process.
Guys, I got to say, I do love the fact that Maneri kind of has a reason, it seems like, for everything that he does, and also has some wherewithal. He's like, look, I understand if you're out there watching this game, you were freezing your tail off. He even acknowledged, he's like, hey, I didn't realize the press box had open doors. Like, you guys were freezing up there too. But it sounded like a sense of creating some adversity for the guys, a sense of teaching them, hey, it's not always going to be perfect. If you're going to be a professional baseball player, there are going to be times, they try to avoid playing in the elements, but there are going to be times where you have to play in the elements. There are going to be times, especially in minor league ball, where you're going to be asked, hey, it's not perfect conditions. Go out there and perform anyway. I get the impression Maneri is a big believer in you don't acknowledge excuses. Like, don't let yourself mentally, it's cold. I don't, this is gonna sting a little more.
Yeah.
Who cares? Go play the game at a high level. And, for the most part, South Carolina, it seemed like just went out there and still went about their business, which I think is a small but good sign.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what the pitching staff did, right? I mean, the team did enough, and I don't think anybody was expecting, given the conditions. I mean, Maneri mentioned, you had the cold, you had the rain, you had the wind blowing in, right? So just bad conditions for hitting the baseball. But despite that, South Carolina did hit the ball hard several times throughout the game and put up 7 runs. I don't think we went into this one saying this is going to be an offensive bonanza for the Gamecocks or anything, but the pitching for the most part, once again, was really good. 7-2 win. It's 36 degrees at first pitch. Gamecocks are 5-0 now, which is, exactly where you want to be. But once again, the offense, took a little bit longer to get going. We've seen that a few times this season, but the pitching really carried this team. Jackson Soucy had a, kind of an abbreviated start, but no runs. I think just 1 hit. Several other guys got an opportunity. Roman Kimball got in there at the end of the game. I think put a clean sheet on the board. So the pitching once again carried this team. And, of course, guys, we talked about this at length yesterday out at Firehouse Subs. They're going to, the lineups this team is going to face, is going to get 10 times more difficult. Right. But you have to be encouraged, I think, in the early going by what you've seen from this pitching staff, because they've taken care of business against the lesser competition that you see at the beginning of the year, but not really just taking care of business. They've been downright impressive, and you feel a lot better in that scenario than you would with the opposite if they were kind of coming out and getting knocked around a little bit in the early part of the season.
Well, and like you said, a solid performance up and down from the pitching staff. Did get into a little bit of trouble there in the top of the 8th inning where Crowther allowed a couple guys on, and then Marlott comes in, did allow the 2 runs across the plate there, and suddenly it's a 3-2 game. But you talk about kind of the no excuses and overcoming, I don't call it adversity, but overcoming a bit of a tight situation there at the end of the game. The offense immediately responds with 4 runs in the bottom of the 8th inning. Obviously gives you the cushion you need to kind of shut things down there with Kimball in the top of the 9th. So it's those kind of things where, again, on a cold day, the ball's not going to be flying as well. You're going to have trouble stringing hits together. But when they really needed to do that at the end of the game, they're going to be able. They found a way to do that, obviously, and that's highlighted once again. We keep talking about him each and every game by Nathan Hall, 4 for 5 with an RBI. He's currently batting .500 through 5 games so far this year. Again, somebody that we knew coming over from Clemson was talented. We just hadn't seen a ton of him, in real game situations yet. But man, and he's going to cool off as everybody does at some point. But man, I can't think of a better start for a guy than what Nathan Hall's done so far.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, we detailed it yesterday that the word I heard from his time at Clemson was that he showed, he flashed a ton of talent, a ton of ability, but it just did not always translate from scrimmages, practices, and all that into the actual game. So to see him playing at a high level, to see him playing with confidence, to see him setting the table for this offense, and you could not ask for more than a .545 on-base percentage, a .500 average, which, we know is not going to stay the same. That's impossible. But I think just for him to get off to this start, considering all those things and considering that he is a newcomer who you were hoping could come in and be this guy for you, I think it's huge. He currently leads the team in hits with 9. He's flashed a little bit of power as well, leads the team in total bases. And I think it's just giving you exactly what you wanted from that spot. Ethan Petrie as well. I almost feel like this could have been a mistake by the computer, but Peyton Butt, who covers, is one of our interns at Gamecock Central, Petrie flew out on a ball that read at 113 miles per hour off the bat.
It was a long fly out.
Which tells you that the ball was just not flying, with the weather yesterday. But Petrie still manages to get 3 hits, a couple RBIs, took a walk. It is showing you that he doesn't have to just be kind of that power guy. Like, he's getting on base. He is hitting for an average right now. He's up there among the guys who kind of qualify, is right behind Nathan Hall. He's hitting .438 and slugging .813, great OPS. And you're getting what you need out of certain guys at the top of this lineup.
Yeah, if Hall, like you said, Wes, you're not going to go, what's wrong with Nathan Hall? He's only, he's slipped from his .500 batting average. He's not going to maintain that, of course, throughout the year. But, man, there have been – it really looks like for someone that really just flashed, like you said, Wes, at Clemson, you can see that he's, reconnected with Monty Lee, obviously, who Lee was very familiar with him during the recruiting process from when he was the head coach at Clemson. Baseball starts so early. Monty Lee has a great relationship with so many guys around the state, with Nathan being an in-state guy originally from Lexington. The talent's been there, and sometimes I think Stuart Lake said this on the broadcast the other day, on the radio broadcast, sometimes it's just a change of scenery for guys, where if a guy has talent for whatever reason, sometimes it's just early in his career. And Nathan Hall at Clemson was, he still relatively early in his career. It's not like this guy's a fifth-year senior, right? That change of scenery has really done him good. Now, there are plenty of challenges ahead, right? Like you said, he's not going to keep up this torrid of a pace, but you can see all the different things he can do. He can get on base. He can hit for power. He can hit for contact. He can go steal a base. He's only struck out once. He can get hit by a pitch, take some walks. Like, he just fills up the stat sheet in really quality ways. And to have that type of presence in the leadoff spot for you, and to set the table, like you said, Wes, for the rest of this lineup that does have, some dangerous guys, including Petrie, in it. That is a welcome sight for the Gamecocks for sure.
Yeah, the ideal kind of guy in that leadoff spot, and don't want to gloss over this yesterday. You finally get Roman Kimball in the game for the first time, this year to close things out in the top of the ninth inning there. And look, he's a guy that's so versatile. Started a lot of games. You can obviously use him in this bullpen kind of role. And as you're working through non-conference play, you're still trying to kind of feel out what exactly everybody gives you. And if you have a healthy Roman Kimball that can kind of be versatile and bounce in between, and if you need somebody to slide into one of those recon spots, he can do that. If you need him to come out of the bullpen and close things out, he can do that as well. So good to see him finally get on the field last night and close things out for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's been kind of a quiet offseason, I feel like, in terms of Kimball, and not much talk about him. He was someone who obviously came in very highly recruited as a transfer, and someone that there were high expectations for here at South Carolina. So, I don't know what it says that it took a little bit later into the season to get him out there. There's a lot of depth on this pitching staff, and depth that I believe is still kind of being sorted out and sorted through. And so you're always going to have some guys that maybe step up, and I think Kimball, with a restart and a new staff, kind of did have to restart a little bit, and is going to have to come, I don't want to say from the bottom of this thing, but is going to have to establish himself. But I think for South Carolina, you can look at this, and it's a good problem to have that you do feel pretty good about all these guys. And obviously you're going to hope you can continue to get maybe some separation among this staff once you start getting into Clemson and then SEC play. But so far, just outstanding in terms of what you've gotten out of these pitchers. And no surprise, by the way, that South Carolina has announced they will go with the same three for this weekend as well. I don't think that's any shock at all, but with what you got out of SQ, Becker, and McCoy. But especially McCoy, I mean, I thought to get what they got out of him on Sunday as a younger guy than the other two was massive for this team going forward.
And again, that next series coming up this weekend against Milwaukee, Friday through Sunday. And first pitch on Friday at 4 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 3:45. In fact, as we head into this break, have another couple family 4-pack tickets to give away for callers number 4 and 5 right now at 803-404-6100. Win yourself a family 4-pack tickets to go see baseball take on Milwaukee coming up this weekend at Founders Park. Some news on the football front yesterday. Some assistants getting new titles added to their resume. With that coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Thursday here on the game.
All right, folks, let me tell you about our friends over at Firehouse Subs, presenting sponsor of this very show, and our hosts yesterday for 3 hours out there at the Irmo location. Shout out to everybody in that store. Had a fantastic time. And shout out to our guy, Larry Chandler, who runs all 15 Firehouse Subs here in the Columbia area in the greater Midlands. 15 and growing. Of course, it is almost lunchtime. I know you're getting hungry. I am too. Try one of the great subs from Firehouse Subs. I tell you what, yesterday I was a little bit more on the meatball with pepperoni. That one was one of my original favorites. I kind of have gravitated, as some of you know, towards brisket add bacon. That's still number one on the power rankings, but meatball pepperoni is making a comeback. Try it or whatever your favorite sub is at Firehouse today, firehousesubs.com or Rapid Rescue on the app.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Not a whole lot of news going on in Gamecock football as of right now, but something interesting that did come out just the other day is some not change in titles, but additions to titles for a couple of Gamecock assistants that were a part of that crew that got extensions and raises going back a couple of weeks ago. So Torian Gray, who, of course, is already the defensive backs coach, has now been added the title of defensive passing game coordinator, while Sterling Lucas, who is the outside linebackers and edge coach, has now added defensive run game coordinator to his title in addition to his other defensive duties. Preston and I were talking about this a lot this morning on the early game, and we hear pass game coordinator, run game coordinator pretty frequently throughout offenses in college football and pro football. This is kind of one of the first instances I can remember of assigning these kind of roles to members of the defensive staff. Like obviously there are people that do these jobs anyway, but kind of highlighting them as this guy's the specific coordinator for this and that is seems to be something that's kind of new.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it at other schools. I don't know how often we've seen it at South Carolina, but this one is a way to reward two guys who have just done everything right and have been very successful in sort of producing at their positions. And, you know, in two, you kind of get the sense this is also giving them titles that already reflect roles that they were sort of kind of involved with anyway. So Torian Gray was already very involved from a coverage standpoint with setting the game plan with Clayton White. And then Sterling Lucas, along with Travian Robertson, were already very involved in sort of the run game aspect of a game plan going into a particular weekend. So South Carolina, very much, Beamer wants to keep these two guys at South Carolina for a long, long time. And they both have had interest from other schools pretty much, I think, every offseason. And so for South Carolina, this was about rewarding two guys. This was about keeping them. And, I think it's easy to maybe be cynical about titles and stuff like that. But this was a sense of Beamer did not want to have all coaches have a bunch of different titles just for the sake of having titles. This is more about him taking care of his guys, taking care of his coaches, doing right by them, and wanted to give them titles that better reflect maybe what their roles are within the program, and certainly well-deserved and is an opportunity for them to sort of move up on that coaching ladder without having to, maybe go outside and seek outside opportunities.
It's always a good thing if other schools or organizations in the NFL teams want to hire your coaches as long as you can keep them, right? Like that's, and we've seen that. I mean, it is not like hyperbole or some exaggeration to say, I think it's been every offseason where, Sterling Lucas has only been a college coach for a few years. He began his career, he was like a GA at NC State. Then he spent some time in the NFL as an assistant, defensive line coach, not the guy, right? But had an important role there. Shane Beamer hires him to be the guy, as the outside linebackers defensive ends coach. And all he's done is come to South Carolina, back to his home state, and he's done what he's done. Torian Gray, year 25 or so for him, Wes, something like that. Mm-hmm. Been around the game a long time. NFL also, been around the college game a while, has a track record, and he's been sought after too. So it's good that, that really is a measure of your success. If someone wants to hire your coaches, that means, especially every year, you've made some good hires there. But then if you keep them, that speaks to your program. So like you said, I think rewarding them for their loyalty too. I mean, either of these guys could have bounced and gone somewhere else. But South Carolina, as we've documented, they're in the business now of investing and paying coaches. That hasn't always been the case. So credit to the administration for that and to Beamer for making that happen. If you have good coaches like these guys, you want to keep them around for continuity and because they've been very effective.
And Wes kind of alluded to it. A lot of what these new titles are with them goes into the preparation, the planning, and kind of expand on that a little bit, because what exactly is the defensive run game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator doing Monday through Friday in preparation for the game? Where, again, Clayton White's still calling the defense, putting the plays in, all that kind of stuff with these guys are coaching their individual units. What exactly are these jobs entailing of these guys?
Yeah, I think for one, it's a carryover from what they're already doing. For two, maybe you're empowering them a little bit more to have that say with Clayton White. And, it could be something as simple as a matchup like, hey, how are we going to defend this particular player? If you're talking about for Torian Gray, obviously his job is to get the defensive backs ready. So there's a ton of carryover in terms of, all right, what coverages are we playing this week? What coverages are kind of our base coverages? What do we want to so-called major in, which is these are our calls. We could shut our eyes no matter what the opponent's doing. Let's say we want to major in quarters. That's kind of our base call. Well, we want to be great at doing that, but then what tweaks are you going to make on a week-to-week basis based on the scheme you're facing, based on the play calling you're facing, and then based on the individual sort of player matchups when you start looking at skill sets? So, Clayton White's going to have the ultimate say in the game plan. And then, of course, Beamer has override capability as the head guy. But you're empowering those guys. You look at the run game quarter. That's more you're talking about run fits. You're talking about alignment. Your coverage and your calls up front are obviously sort of tied together as well. You can only run certain coverages based on how many guys you have in the box or don't have in the box. So all those things are going to have to fit together. It's just a matter of coming in, having maybe a little bit more power to say, hey, I like this week, or I like maybe if you're South Carolina, you're facing a great running back. Let's dive into this scheme. What are we going to do to try and slow this guy down where our coverage can marry what we're trying to do up front? And, all those things already happen. It's just a matter of rewarding these guys with those titles, keeping them happy, doing right by them, and then, of course, maybe empowering them a little bit more.
Yeah, I think what Wes said there about just the title kind of reflecting what they do. And it could be that here at South Carolina, those guys are a little bit more, it's a good word, Wes, empowered to do a little bit more than at other places. But a lot of times you hear, like, I remember the late, great Brad Lawing, yes, he's the defensive line coach. He was the defensive line coach for so many years at many different programs, but defensive coordinators would lean on him to, okay, it's third down. What are we doing here in this situation, Brad? Like, what are the quote unquote pass rush rules? What types of stunts and games and things like that? What are you running up front? What personnel package do you like here? Remember, Brad Lawing had the Rabbits package here at South Carolina, where it was, here's not just one elite pass rusher, here's 4 of them. Good luck dealing with them. And the kind of rules and games that come off of that. So, that happens here, of course. And then, the run game, you're going to have certain rules and things like that of how you're supposed to play the box in the run game. So I think it's just, titles are a great way to, reward guys. And typically with a title, you're going to have a salary increase. And when you're trying to keep good coaches, titles, salary increases, rewarding them, that's a great way to keep them around your program, particularly when they're wanted by other places.
Yeah, and to add to this, just to put a bow on it, as we found out in December, Mike Fury also added the passing game coordinator title on the offensive side. So we know that Sean Elliott came in as run game coordinator. Fury now gets passing game coordinator. And, interestingly enough, the Torian Gray and Sterling Lucas changes, adding the titles, came a little bit later. But Fury added that in December. And from what I was told on that one, kind of threefold as well. 1, rewarding the job he did. 2, this is a guy who also was heavily sought after, has turned down other jobs as well. And then 3, and from what we heard on this one, this is a sense of they truly want him to be more involved in the offense moving forward. This is somebody who obviously has experience at the NFL level, both coaching and playing the wide receiver position. And so in this sense, there was a little bit more of, hey, let's empower Fury to have a little bit more say on the offense, to dive into sort of that passing game coordinator role and have some say in what you're doing in terms of that part of the offense. And also was something when they initially hired Fury was kind of discussed as a possibility. Let's see what happens after a year. Let's see how things go in year one, and then we'll talk about this. And then obviously you look at what he did with the receivers and recruiting. It was, all right, we've seen enough. Let's go ahead and reward him.
And more on this coming up next, because you guys both kind of touched on it in a roundabout way of, the position this staff is in coming off of a strong season to be retaining the amount of staffers that they are. We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Thursday here on The Game. And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Of course, talking about the news. It's not new news. This was done back in December, but has come to light.
January,
excuse me, that Torian Gray, that Mike Furry's was done in December. Yep. Torian Gray and Sterling Lucas have additional titles added on to their defensive duties as we head into the 2025 season. As I mentioned a moment ago, you and Chris both touched on it to a degree, but I don't think it's something that we can kind of gloss over here. For as successful as the season as South Carolina just had, winning 9 games, yes, you lost Dow Loggins, who went on to be the coach at App State, and replaced him with somebody already on staff with Mike Shula. To retain pretty much your entire coaching staff coming off of a solid season like that is a pretty rare thing in college football. Yes, it was aided by the fact that most of those guys got extensions and raises and all that kind of stuff. But, for as many unknowns as we have going into this year with the talent on the field, the coaching staff staying in place, those guys that have been proven developers like Ray and like Sterling Lucas that rightfully got their raises and these new titles added to them, that gives you a lot of hope in this year being hopefully just as good, if not better.
I think loyalty goes both ways, and you are seeing an assistant coaching staff that has been loyal. Now they're being taken great care of as well. They all, I think, as with anything, there are a lot of little details that add up to be the result of what happens. And in this case, for one, look at South Carolina being proactive. And remember how early they got these new contracts done with the assistants, and it was just across the board. Hey, new contracts, raises, extensions, and, different guys got different numbers, of course, based on a lot of different factors. But it was very proactive in taking care of the guys. I think that goes a long way with assistant coaches. And loyalty goes both ways. And what I mean by that is look at Shane Beamer's decision around this time, or really around December of last offseason, when everybody and their mama was saying South Carolina needed to make coaching changes on the defensive side of the ball. And Shane Beamer said, essentially with his actions, no, we're gonna tweak our approach on defense potentially. We're gonna have a plan on defense. We're gonna go hit the transfer portal on defense. But I'm sticking with my guys because I believe in them. And obviously in this case, we've been talking more about Torian Gray, we've been talking more about Sterling Lucas, but the amount of loyalty that Beamer showed to Clayton White and then was rewarded by on-field success, one of the best South Carolina defenses we've seen in some time, I think, for one, that trickles down to your other guys. I think your other guys see that. I think, Clayton White could have had other opportunities to go elsewhere this offseason as well. But even though he had a big year, even though he had a great season as a DC, he's still at South Carolina, too. He sticks around as well. So I think that loyalty can be a two-way street. And for South Carolina, really the one guy you lost, it was for a huge promotion. You're going to be a head coach. And even at that spot, Chris, you promoted Mike Shula. So it wasn't like you just brought in completely new blood at that spot. So Beamer, I would say on all sides of this, very much values that continuity, and we're seeing that. But I think because he values that continuity, that loyalty sort of carries over when maybe these assistants have other opportunities too.
Yeah, kind of a two-way street there. And Beamer, I think, has a pretty good creates a good environment to work in. You hear of some coaches out there that are, quite frankly, a nightmare to work for. Wes, you and I are probably same page of thinking of a couple of them where we've heard some coaches talk about it, where it's 10 p.m. let's have a special teams meeting. What? And not that coaches, the people in that building, Shane Beamer among them, he's probably one of the first guys in the building, and they work hard, right? But there can be a balance, and I think certain coaches appreciate that. And if you are a coach at South Carolina, you have a good job and you're going to be compensated very well. As we've said, whether you're the head coach, whether you're an assistant coach, a coordinator, South Carolina is very competitive with the pay there. But the environment, I mean, those things matter. You look at made a good point, Wes, like you have success, you sometimes see teams coaching staffs kind of clear out. And it's not always just guys going for a better opportunity. Sometimes it's like a house of cards type of thing, where you kind of look and there's some things beneath the surface and guys are leaving, or there's other circumstances. Like look at Ohio State. They'll probably be fine. They're super talented. They'll hire really good replacement coaches, or have hired really good, I think, replacement coaches, but they lost a couple coaches who just took positions in the NFL that were the same as they had in college. I mean, Chip Kelly, OC to OC, college to pros. Their offensive line coach, Justin Fry, he went to go take an O-line coaching job in the NFL, right? And Torian Gray and Sterling Lucas could have probably done similar to that. I don't know if it would have been the DB's coach, the defensive line coach, but they've had pro opportunities and college opportunities along the way. Heck, Ohio State's DC went and took another college DC job, So if you have good coaches, you want to keep them. You're right, Wes. Beamer has absolutely valued continuity and has honestly taken some flack for it at times. Remember how I dare say the majority of people wanted him to absolutely clear out his staff after the 23 season, and he made some tweaks. He favored continuity in other circumstances, and that ended up paying off in a pretty big way this past season.
Yeah, and I would say when coaches want out, if they're even solid coaches, they can find ways out. So I think for one, you're rewarding them to keep other schools from coming in, but you're also trying to make that great work environment like you talked about, and making them just feel appreciated. I think to where. I mean, we saw it, frankly. I mean, we saw it with Justin Stepp. He didn't get fired. He got moved to tight ends coach, but he instantly started looking for other opportunities. He ends up at Illinois. So I think, in terms of taking care of your guys, other schools can come in, NFL franchises can come in, but also if they're not happy, they could be looking for other avenues. And in this case, for most of this staff, we have not seen that. So continuity, I think, goes a long way. And, to Chris's point, Ohio State, they'll probably be fine. But, how many years did Nick Saban just churn through coaches? And
seems like every year.
Every year, man, you're breaking in new OCs, new DCs, and new assistants. And, I think you look at that and you were always going, can he keep replacing these guys with similar talents in terms of coaches? And for the longest time he did, but did it ultimately kind of chip away? You can't, nobody bats 1,000 on these things. So Ohio State, I'm sure they're hiring great coaches, but man, Chip Kelly, that's not an easy guy to replace.
No, not at all. And again, well deserved for both Torian Gray and Sterling Lucas to get those additions to their titles on what they're already doing on the defensive side of the football. Again, I was hanging out with Preston this morning in the early game. He's opened my eyes to the fact that we need to come up with better titles for these kind of roles, because defensive run game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator, a little too bland. I want to let you guys put your thinking caps on and see if you can come up with something a little bit better than those titles. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, Tyler West and Chris on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris on your Thursday here on the game. Don't forget, tonight, 7 o'clock tip. Pregame coverage is 6:30 for women's basketball. Taking on Arkansas on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG. You'll hear from Coach Paris on Carolina Calls tonight at 6 o'clock here on the game in Columbia and 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. So obviously we've talked a lot this hour about the new or the additional job titles for Torian Gray and Sterling Lucas as the respective defensive pass game and run game coordinators for Clayton White's defense going into the 2025 season. Hanging out with Preston this morning, he's opened my eyes to the fact that these are very boring job titles and we need to spice them up a little bit. We got the audience involved this morning and they came up with some new names for these kind of jobs. Assistant Vice Defensive Run Coordinator was one suggestion. Lieutenant Coordinator, Saxecutioner for Sterling Lucas. Let's see, Sir Pix-a-Lot for Torian Gray. You know, some added little flair that makes this a little more fun. Do you guys have any recommendations on what we can call these new titles for these guys?
Well, in the view of the new college football world, how about since these are already incredibly long titles anyway?
Sure.
I'm just going to say maybe we go with the Firehouse Subs defensive run game coordinator.
Yes.
You know what?
Yes.
Sponsoring job titles. That is something I didn't even consider, but if there's an avenue for revenue, why not?
You could have, Chris, we could have the extra point with Tyler Head on 107.5, the game, passing game coordinator.
I think it's brilliant. The endowed title. I mean, they do have the, like, I think Georgia, Michigan, like Kirby Smart is like the, I don't know, Jim and Pam Halpert, you know, head football coach at Georgia, whatever, you know. So they have those, but they need to get some more creativity. Yes, sponsored / endowed job titles. I did come up with one that I would personally vouch for that I think fans would also like. Like, I think if you had, I guess this would maybe be your defensive line coach. It could also be a linebackers coach. It could even be your defensive coordinator. Run czar. Just the run czar.
Okay.
You know, like, just my job is to stop the run.
That could work. I like that.
I like it.
Yeah. Short, sweet, and to the point. Something that could kind of catch on and be catchy. What is kind of, because again, we talked about it where defensive run game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator are kind of newer in terms of being assigned that role, which again, already kind of existed in what these guys were doing on defense. But again, you kind of give them that official title to kind of show, you know, how much influence they have in that area. And obviously it warrants it with the contract extension, the raise, and all that kind of stuff. What is the next job title to become a thing or to pop up or to become the new norm in college football, I guess?
I don't know, but guys, this works more for offense. I got a couple of examples for you.
All right.
This is why the AI machines are going to just put us all out.
Well, they're about to take over baseball, so.
I asked ChatGPT for some ideas. This is better for offense, but ground assault coordinator.
All right.
That's a good one.
I mean, that's Sean Elliott's new title now. Ground assault coordinator. Ground warfare coordinator, rushing dynamics coach, and let's see, there's one more good one. Run game maestro. I kind of like that too.
Okay, we could play off that like aerial assault coordinator for passing game.
Passing game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something
I like
along those lines.
you know, and this kind of sticks with South Carolina's recruiting team on the O line of trenches. I like just trench monster for the O line coach.
Trench warfare.
Trench master.
Yeah.
Hashtag trenches.
Yeah.
Hashtag trenches. Yes.
Because
I don't know. There's they'll come up with something. I mean, you did have, like, Nick Saban came up with the most Nick Saban title ever when he hired somebody who actually ended up going to Clemson and working for Dabo Swinney, Thad Turnipseed, who was an incredible hire at Bama and Clemson. But he called him the director of external affairs. And it's like, what does that mean? What does that guy do? He just does things.
Yeah. Well, and especially now that, you know, you can hire as many assistants or analysts as you want and they can be involved in on the field stuff. You know, the possibilities are endless. I perused Florida's coaching staff earlier today because they're known for having ridiculous job titles for certain people. I was trying to distinguish because they have a associate head coach, and then they have an executive head coach underneath Billy Napier. I'm like, what's the difference? What's an executive head coach on a football team? What is that?
Seems like Billy Napier would be the executive head coach.
Like, exactly. Like that's
title.
That's what I thought. But I'm like, no, this guy's their executive head coach, I guess, and whatever. It looks good on a business card, but I don't know what that does.
Yeah,
The vice head coach.
Yeah. By the way, I asked for passing game coordinator too. I mean, it kind of played like you did off the aerial warfare coordinator, aerial attack strategist.
Okay,
it's a good one. Ball distribution specialist. Kind of good. By the way, did Preston have any favorites?
He liked Saxecutioner and Sir Pix quite a bit. Because again, we all get the reference, all get what it's playing off of, and he just wants something more creative than defensive pass game coordinator, defensive run game coordinator. With pass game on offense, you could do just call him Oppenheimer if he's building bombs, right? If you got a quarterback that can sling it.
Yeah, you could.
Because everybody would get it, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be a special teams.
Oh, special teams.
Somewhere in there. Man, too bad. Let's get Pete Limbo to call in and ask him. He would certainly have some ideas immediately.
Well, he could probably reference some French general from the 1800s that probably had the specific title that we're looking for.
Yeah, no doubt. By the way, did we before we get out of here, did we get any top song suggestions?
Let's see. Let's go back to the top here. Let's see. We got the SpongeBob theme song. Don't know if that'll fit quite as well, but Walking in Your Footsteps by The Police was a suggestion for one person. I have to dig through some of these other ones, but I got to get – did you come up with your list, by the way? Do you have your list? You're working on it?
No. I was trying to pay attention to what you were saying.
That's good.
Wes was actually
appreciate that.
doing the show today.
Yeah. Well, at some point today, if you can get me your list, I will try and nail this down tomorrow so we can start fresh next week.
By the way, I know he sometimes listens, so shout out to our boss man, Brian Shoemaker, and happy birthday to him.
Yeah.
Happy birthday,
Shu.
Happy birthday, Shu. Hopefully you're listening, watching. He's a YouTube guy. He'll watch on the Game TV live stream.
Absolutely. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Terry Ford up next on your Thursday in the game.